Welcome to the service clinic at Low Country Harley-Davidson. I'm Doc Harley. So I hear some of you are changing cams and you're doing it at home. Well, that's okay as long as you have the proper tools and you have a factory service manual. You can do this. I want to bring up a small tech tip that you may not know about and you should really look at while you have your cams out. And that is the spring-loaded pressure relief valve in your cam plate. In the cam plate, as you're looking at it this direction, the pressure relief valve is located here. It has a pin that holds the spring in place that is putting pressure against the relief valve. All right, the relief valve is connected to a bypass port inside. When the pressure gets too much, it backs off, allows the oil to get out of the way so the pressure doesn't go over the factory specifications. To examine, to make sure that your pressure relief valve is working correctly, you may want to take the time to disassemble and see if everything is working smoothly. I use a 3/32 punch. I put my finger over the end and I punch through and push the pin as far as it will allow the spring to pop out. Once the pin is gone, the spring will come out. Now, this spring is not just a common spring. This spring is factory spec to, on a twin cam, keep 35 to 38 PSI going in your motor at 2000 RPM at operating temperature of the oil. You know, all that specs have to be correct for this to be working correctly. Once the pressure gets too much, let's just say it's 20 degrees out, you have 2050 oil. Oil is a little thicker. You start up your motorcycle. The thicker oil creates a little bit more pressure, and that's too much for all the seals and everything that's in the motor. So it opens up a bypass valve and allows the extra pressure oil to return and then get out of the way so the oil pressure is complete. Now, what I want to talk about today is once you push this pin out of the way and the spring comes out, here at the shop, I have these small hole gauge tools. And I use those to put it inside and pull out the valve. Now, a lot of you don't have these measuring tools in your shop. You can use this, but you have to be very, very careful. This is not something you go in and pry really, really hard because you can distort the plunger. So you go in as deep as it'll go and kind of pull it out. Take a smart flat. Now here's the unit out in itself. You got your plunger, you got your spring, and you got your pin. All right. What you want to do is take a bright flashlight and look inside. Are there any pieces of metal, grooves, anything like that that would stop this from seating at the very bottom? And especially if you have a motorcycle with a lot of age, or if you have the early ones with these tensioners. These tensioners wear, and this plastic sometimes gets inside and will hold this up. And that's what I want you to check on is if there are grooves inside here, or if there's debris in here, then this unit at the very end can't seal. So you will have pressure, but you'll have minimum pressure or even less than minimum pressure. So what does that mean? If your valve is stuck and it's not doing, well, you might be riding once in a while and you hear a little clatter, but it goes away. Or maybe the clatter gets a little bit louder and then your top end gets a little bit louder, but your motor's running okay, it just gets noisier. Well, that's because the pressure is being bled off and not enough pressure is going to the hydraulics or going to the top end. So while you have this off, I know you won't have this next tool in your garage, but take your plate to a shop that is known for doing performance work. Fueling offers this tool, all right? It is to imitate oil pressure. It goes on your cam plate, air is applied, and then as the air is applied, when it gets to the 35 to 38, the valve should pop off. And that will tell you, okay, I've got a spring that is working correctly. What if it pops off a little bit too early? All right, then it's time to replace the spring. You can replace it with a factory one, or Fueling offers different springs for possibly a little bit more pressure. If you're using different lifters, aftermarket lifters, they sell their own lifters that match up with their spring to give a little bit more pressure to keep the hydraulics up on a high lift cam. The other thing that this shows, and this is why we do it here at the shop, is after a lot of age on a cam plate, you have a cast plate, you have a steel plunger. A lot of times they don't match, especially after a lot of miles on it. So it pops off at 35, 38, but as you take the air off, it still is leaking and it doesn't seal in itself. That's when I think about replacing the plate. And this is why a lot of times Harley shops and aftermarket shops say, hey, why don't you update to the billet plate? Because the billet plate doesn't expand and wear out like the cast plate. We've tested these more often than these, and these hold and seal a lot better than this. But let's just say this isn't in your budget to upgrade to a billet plate. Axtel offers a possible idea. I don't have one in stock, but I have these instructions. Axtel actually gives you a piece that goes in, that has the valve that goes into their steel piece with their spring and their cap on the end where you put the pin. This unit works. I've used this on several cast plates. It holds the pressure. It pops and seals better. So if you find that your plate isn't quite well, don't have the income to do the billet plate upgrade, think about possibly this idea, because this helps. This will help your motorcycle have better lubrication, all right? It will work when it needs to, and it will keep the pressure where it needs to be, because here's the scenario. If your valve starts leaking and is not sealing, all right, then you're at, let's say, the minimum, 35, or maybe even 30. And then the oil goes through your motor and gets to your piston pin squirters. They open up to cool your pistons. Well, they take the oil pressure away. So now your 33, 35 is lower down to 28, and less oil is going to your lifters and going to your top end. So this little unit that is highly missed when people are doing their own cams at home can really kind of ruin your day of after you've done all this cam work. You think the higher lift cam is what's making the noise, and it's not. It's your pressure relief valve. So when you're at home and you're doing your cams, find a shop that has this tool. Bring it, your plate. That's all you need to do. Bring your plate to that. They can put this on. They can test it for you and say, hey, yes, you're working fine, spring's fine, go put it back together again. Or, hey, maybe you should think about the billet plate, and then you could say, well, order me the Axtel and let me put it in and let me go back to putting it all back together myself. Just a little tech tip and a little hint to look at while you're building your performance motorcycle. I'm Doc Harley. We'll see you next week.